Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 30 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. This is one of a series of verses in which Bhagavan is, which are about the state of jnani, beginning from verse 28 onwards. Yes, from verse 28 onwards, it's all there about the state of the jnani. So in this verse, what Bhagavan says is, I'll first read the Tamil verse. Se mayulum sendru kade ket pa pol vardanegal te manum sedum seyade. Avagal toy manum sedu indru enum seyade. Ingu asebu atrum kanavil kundru eri virva kuri. What that means is, like those who hear a story, the mind going far away, or the mind having gone far away, the mind in which vasanas have been destroyed is actually not doing, even though doing. The mind that those soak, those he refers to vasanas, the mind that those vasanas soak is actually doing, even though not doing. Even though movement has ceased here, in dream, climbing a hill, one falls in a pit. That's the exact meaning of the verse. An explanatory paraphrase of that is, like those who seemingly hear a story, even though their mind is actually going far away, and therefore not hearing the story at all, the mind in which all vasanas have been erased is not actually doing any action at all, even though in the view of others it seems to be doing any number of actions. On the other hand, the mind that those soaked, that is, the mind that is soaked or drenched with vasanas, is actually doing action, even though it is seemingly not doing any action. Just as though movement has ceased here, that is, even though in the waking world they seem to be lying without movement in a bed, in dream, climbing a hill, they fall in a pit. This is a very, very significant verse, because in this verse, Bhagavan indicates that though the jnani may seem to do any number of actions, the jnani doesn't actually do anything at all. That is, the jnani seems to be doing actions because we take the jnani to be a body, to be a person. So, as a person means endowed with body and mind. And therefore, the jnani seems to us to be engaged in so many actions, both bodily actions and actions of speech and actions of mind. But these all exist only in our view, not in the view of the jnani. Just like someone who is listening, who is seemingly listening to a story, when their mind has actually gone far away, thinking about other things, such a person is not hearing the story at all, even though they seem to be hearing it. Like that, the jnani is not doing any action at all, even though seemingly doing action. That's about the state of the jnani. For the ajnani, however, the mind is still soaked with vasanas. So even when the ajnani seems to be doing nothing, actually they are doing. The reason for this is vasanas are present so long as ego is present. That is, it is the very nature of ego to have vasanas. So, so long as we rise as ego, our mind is soaked with vasanas. Our mind is drenched with vasanas. So, and so long as we rise as ego, we identify the mind and body as I. So the actions done by mind, speech, and body are experienced by us as I am doing this. I am sitting, I am talking, I am thinking, I am hearing, I am seeing. All these are, we identify with all these states of the body and mind because of our identification with them. So even when the body and mind are not doing anything, the doership remains. So if the body is sitting still, I am sitting still. If the body is not doing anything, I am not doing anything. If the mind is active, thinking, I am thinking. If the mind is quiet, I am quiet. So because we identify with the instruments of action, whether the instruments are doing any action or not, the doership is there. That is why Bhagavan says that those whose minds are soaked with vasanas are doing even though seemingly they are not doing. That is, the mind, speech, and body may not be doing anything, but the doership remains because of the false identification. I am this person, I am this body. The mind, of course, is included in the body. It's one of the five sheaths, and as Bhagavan says in verse 5 of Uڵḷadu, all the body is a form of five sheaths. So all the five sheaths are included in the term body. So even when the mind is not active, we identify with that mind and say, I am not active. But when we do not rise as ego, when we remain as we actually are, we are beyond all pairs of opposites. So we are beyond both doing and non-doing. That is the state of the jnani. And that is why Bhagavan says, even though the jnani seems to be doing, they're not doing anything. The truth is, ultimately, they are beyond both doing and not doing. They are just pure being. Whereas for the ajnani, the one who rises as ego, we are doing even when we are not doing, because we identify with the instruments of action which are temporarily not doing anything. And the analogy he gives is of someone sleeping in a bed. Though the body of the sleeping person, from the perspective of those in the waking world, the body seems to be lying on a bed, fast asleep. The experience of that ego, they are experiencing a dream in which they climb a hill and fall into a pit. So we cannot give up doership without giving up ego. And when we give up ego, we thereby give up the vasanas. And so long as the vasanas remain, the ego is certainly there, because ego is the root of all vasanas. Vasanas cannot remain without ego, because vasanas are just inclinations. Whose inclinations are they? They're ego's inclinations. So when ego is destroyed, the vasanas are destroyed. When ego is still seemingly present, all its vasanas are present. That is, during the course of sadhana, we can weaken our vasanas to some extent, but we cannot destroy them entirely without destroying their root, namely ego. So the presence of vasanas and the presence of ego are synonymous. They go hand in hand. So long as ego remains, we are doing, even when we seem to be doing nothing. This verse, incidentally, is an adaptation by Bhagavan of two verses from the Yoga Vashista. One day when Bhagavan was discussing these two verses, Muruganar recorded the meaning of them, as Bhagavan had explained it, in verses 1133 and 1134 of Guruvasa Kavai. And when Bhagavan saw these two verses composed by Muruganar, he summarized them both in this verse. So this verse is Bhagavan's summary of two verses composed by Muruganar, which convey the meaning of two verses in Yoga Vashista. So does anyone have any question about this this verse?
Although in those two verses, Michael, is Muruganar giving a bit more information than what Bhagavan gives?
A little bit more. Wait a second, I'll read the, this is a translation that Sadhu and I did many years ago. 1133 is, though they undertake and do many actions, vivaharas, those whose mental tendencies, manovasanas, are dead, are just like one who sits for a long time, seemingly listening to Puranic stories, but who has in fact directed his mind far away. So there's not much of substance that is not conveyed by Bhagavan. Bhagavan was a master of packing ideas into a few words. And then in the next verse, verse 1134, which is the second, which is what the equivalent of the second half of Bhagavan's verse, though they are sitting quiet, if their mental tendencies, manavasanas, are not destroyed, they are indeed those who have done everything as the doer, just like one who, in dream, there's some words added in square brackets, just like one who suffers by thinking in dream that he has climbed a hill and is falling headfirst over a precipice, though in fact his body is lying quietly, sleeping on his bed. So they don't really contain much that is not in Bhagavan's verse, nothing of any substance.
And what's the practical significance of this verse?
We can't. Bhagavan's core teaching is Sumairu, just be. But we can't just be so long as we rise as ego. The state that is described as Sumairu, just being, is what Bhagavan describes in verse 27 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu as Nanudyada Ullanile, the state in which I is without rising. Or very, very literally, the I not rising being state. So it's a state in which we do, only when we don't rise as ego are we being as we actually are. That's why he says in that sentence, the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are as that.
So Rati is asking, so Michael, the only sattvasana worth having is a desire to turn within, or summa-irittal, right?
The only sattvasana worth having.
Yeah.
Right? Sattvasana means by inclination just to be as we are. There's only one sattvasana, and that is the vasana that we should all have. And only when that vasana becomes stronger than all our Vishaya vasanas combined, will we finally be willing to let go of everything and just subside back into the heart and thereby be as we actually are. So that is the vasana we should all be cultivating. And the means to cultivate it is by the practice of self-investigation. Because the nature of vasanas is vasanas have no existence independent of us. So they derive, whatever strength they seem to have, they derive from us. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. And the more we refrain from being swayed by a vasana, the weaker it becomes. So in order to strengthen the Sattvasana and weaken all the Vishaya vasanas, we need to patiently and persistently practice self-attentiveness. Because when our attention is fixed only on ourselves, we are under the sway of the Sattvasana. It's only under the sway of the Sattvasana that we attend to ourselves. And by attending to ourselves, we are refraining from being swayed by any of the other countless vasanas that are constantly rising in the mind. As Bhagavan says in Nana, the vasanas rise in countless numbers like ocean waves. That is all mental activity, is nothing but a play of our vasanas. Our vasanas are the seeds that create this whole universe. Everything that we experience is nothing but a projection of our, or a sprouting of our vasanas.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
In what context these two verses were spoken about in Yoga Vasistha?
I can't remember. I may have known at one time, but we could check. There's a complete translation of Yoga Vasistha available on I think wisdom.org. So
Right.
we could read the whole chapter.
And this is what verses did you say in yours?
This is part 5, chapter 56, verses 13 and 14. This is the link where the whole translation is available.
Just for those who may watch the video later, I'll spell out the link. HTTPS, www.wisdomlib, wisdomlib.org/Hinduism, HINDUISM/book, B as in boy, OOK, then /yoga, YOGA, dash, Vasistha, V as in Victor, A, S as in Sam, I, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, H as in hat, A apple, dash, English, ENGLISH.
This is in a chapter called Investigation into Meditation and Contemplation. And Rama asked Vasistha, tell me, I don't know how good this translation is, tell me, sir, that art acquainted with the past and future, whether one is employed in the affairs of the world and at the same time is enlightened and situated in his quietude, and another who remains in his solitary devotion apart from worldly connections, which of these two has greater merit? I.e., whether the social or the solitary devotee. And Vasistha then says, he who views the association of properties and qualities of things, which constitute all bodies in general, as quite distinct from the soul, enjoys cool tranquility within himself, which is designated by the name of samadhi. He who is certain that the visibles bear relation to his mind only and have no connection with his soul, the visibles, I think, means the Vishayas, all the phenomena, and have no connection with his soul, and remains calm and cool in himself, may be either engaged in business or sit quietly in his meditation. Both of these are happy souls as long as they enjoy a cool calmness within themselves. But it is this internal coolness of the soul only which is the result of great and austere devotion. When a man in his habit of quietude feels the fickleness of his mind, his habitude then turns to the reeling of a giddy or madman. When the sprawling madman is devoid of desires in his mind, his foolish frolic is then said to resemble the rapacious emotions and gesticulation of Buddhist mendicants. The worldly man who is enlightened in his mind and the enlightened sage who is sitting in his hermitage are both of them alike in their spiritual coolness and have undoubtedly reached the state of their blessedness. And then comes the two verses, the Bhagavan translated, but I think it's not so accurate. The man who is unrelated with the actions that he does, but bears a mind which is free from desire, such as a man who engrossed with other thoughts, he is sensible of what he hears and sees with his organs only, without being affected by them. I suspect this is not a very accurate translation. A man becomes the agent of an act, even without his doing it actually, who is fully intent upon the action. As the unmoving man thinks himself be moving about and falls down in a ditch. So that's the context.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't think this is a very good translation.
Yeah. Then I've noticed that a few times, whenever I look at it.
Yeah, but there is every verse has a link above it saying Sanskrit available, and if you click on that, it takes you to a page where it gives a word-for-word meaning.
Right.
But even the word-for-word meaning in many cases is not very accurate. But
What I'm surprised is they mention Vasishtha and Rama and Buddha in this one. Are they? I mean, just the time frame doesn't.
Again, that may be the translator's interpretation.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows?
Buddha just means enlightened one, right?
No, they talk about the Buddhist mendicants, the gesticulation of Buddhist mendicants.
Oh.
Michael, is there a good translation of the Yoga Vasishtha?
I don't know.
No. What he's reading is about the best we can get.
Okay.
That's one by I think Swami Venkatesananda's translation. And it's not. I mean, it's pretty decent, but it's not very, very accurate. But it's Venkatesananda, right, Michael? The one that you're reading.
Probably. Let me just see. What does it say? No, this one is Bihari Lala Mitra.
Okay.
I have a feeling this is one that was done in it's a very old I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it, oh no, it may be Mahabharata. No, sorry, I'm thinking of Mahabharata. There's one complete translation of the Mahabharata translated in the 1890s or something.
Right. So in that case, I would recommend checking out Venkatesananda's translation.
Oh, yeah, but his is not complete, I think.
Yeah,
I think that's the one that's called the
But the only problem is it doesn't split out exact verse number by verse number correctly.
Yeah.
And so you can get a little bit lost in there.
Where do we find that, sir?
Which one?
The one you just mentioned, that wasn't complete.
Venkatesananda's, you could just Google it. Venkatesananda Yoga Vasishtha. It's freely available in PDF.
Is it the one that's called the Supreme Yoga that was published by the State University of New York?
Exactly. It's like SUNY I think so. SUNY Buffalo or Brooklyn just published it. So, okay. Anyway, let's move on. I think Sanjay had a question. Michael, how should we understand the terms Shruti and Smriti in the context of spiritual texts? My little research indicates that Shrutis mean that which is heard, and these comprise of the Vedas and Upanishads, and Smritis mean that which is remembered, and these comprise the Puranas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and so on. Could you please elaborate on this whole thing? Thank you.
Yes, well, the literal meaning of Sruti is what is heard. The literal meaning of Smriti is what is remembered. But Sruti is a term that is used, generally it's used to refer just to the Vedas, which of course includes the Upanishads. The Smriti is the Ityasas, that's the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Puranas, and many other associated texts. So, for example, the Prasthana Traya of Vedanta, Prasthana Traya means the three source texts. The Sruti Prasthana is the Upanishads. The Smriti Prasthana is the Bhagavad Gita. And the, I think they call it the Tarka, the logic.
Nyaya Prasthana.
Nyaya Prasthana, is it? The Nyaya Prasthana is the Brahma Sutra. But these are just classifications.
Right. I don't know if I'm correct.
Supposedly, the Sruti are more authoritative than the Smriti, supposedly. But I think you'll find very few Vedantins who would consider the Karma Kanda of the Vedas to be more authoritative than the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Smriti. So these are all just different classifications. They need not concern us. Ultimately, a spiritual text is useful to the extent to which it directs us to turn back within and find out what we actually are.
So why is it called what is heard? What is heard means what?
Because the Vedas are supposed to be, supposedly they were not written by anyone. They were not composed by anyone. The Veda rishis heard them. That is, they were divine revelation. Because the Vedas are supposed to be eternal. That's why they're called rishi, is connected with the word dris, to see. So they are the seers. So they saw or heard what was eternal. The Vedas are eternal, so they saw that eternal truth in the Vedas, or saw or heard it. That's why it's called Sruti.
So I think we can say that in their infinite clarity of self-awareness, all these things were revealed from within.
Yes, we can say that.
We can say that.
Yeah.
Because that makes more sense. In the context of Bhagwan's...
In the context of Bhagwan's teaching, that would make more sense.
Yes,
but
yes.
I'm not. It's then we are saying that all the karma kanda of the Vedas was seen in the infinite clarity of pure awareness. Maybe, who knows? But it's not. What is important is a text is useful to the extent to which it directs us to turn back within, directs us and motivates us to turn back within. So all these classifications and whether the Vedas are divinely revealed or whether they were written by anyone, it really need not concern us. Our only concern should be to find out what we actually are. When we find out what we actually are, we'll know there's only one thing that is real, one only without a second, and that is ourself. Everything else is just a dream.
And so what does it mean by what is remembered? How do we understand this?
Because it's the Ityasas and Puranas were passed down by generation by generation by generation. That is, these texts being written is relatively recent. I think writing became common in India only in the last 2,500 years or so. before that, everything was passed down by word of mouth. The Vedas were not written. They were passed down generation by generation by generation. In the same way, the Puranas and Ityasas, we have the written texts now, but originally they were oral transmission. So it's what's remembered. But we need not worry about there's so many, if we go into all these details, there's endless details. Hinduism is a vast ocean. We could go on for lifetimes studying Hinduism. We still wouldn't get to the end of it. It's a vast, vast ocean. We need to be like the Hamsa, the swan. Why the swan is considered to be a divine bird, it is believed that if you give a swan milk mixed with water, it will take the milk and leave the water. That again, that may be mythology, but that is what is believed. So the swan is often used as an example of how the spiritual aspirant should be. We should take the essence. We should take what is useful and leave the rest.
So you're saying, Michael, that these texts exist strictly that we may develop the sadvasana?
The most useful ones. But all these texts, they all have, even the Karma Kanda has its place, because people, when the Sadhu Om has described it beautifully in the Bhakti chapter of the Path of Sri Ramana. That is, we start off with the law of the jungle, might is right.
Right.
As we see in many politicians and big business people nowadays, it's exactly the same. They're going by the law of the jungle, the might is right. What they can get away with, they'll get away with. So that's the most undeveloped state of mind. Then, so we're all jivas are seeking happiness, because infinite happiness is our real nature. As soon as we rise as ego, we have seemingly separated ourselves from that infinite happiness that we actually are. So we're all seeking happiness. So the tyrants and the crooks and of this world, they're also seeking, they're just like us, they're seeking happiness, but they are seeking happiness. They think that what they can acquire by their strength, their physical strength or their financial strength or their cunning or whatever, that is how to go about things. But then we're never satisfied with whatever we get. So after undergoing so many difficulties, we begin to look for a better way of finding happiness. And so this is where the karma kanda comes in. Yes, you can enjoy all the pleasures of this world and the next world, but you have to, all these are the results of karma. So you have to act in a way that is according to dharma. And according to the karma kandis, the dharma is what is prescribed in the Vedas. So doing all the ritual actions and everything. The equivalent in other religions, most people who go to churches, temples, mosques, synagogues, gurudwaras, whatever, the 99% of religious people, why do they go to the places of worship? Why do they pray to God? They pray for this and that. So they're praying for, but the religions teach them, all religions teach, but you must abide by certain codes of conduct. So this is slowly beginning to curb the desires. So you have your desires, you can fulfill your desires, but you must do so according to certain code of conduct. So this is slowly in this way curbing the desires. And then we go to temples and churches and mosques, we pray to so many gods or so many different saints or whatever. Every religion, there are so many different well, in Hinduism, it's simplest. There are many, many gods, and every god has their own speciality. So if you're facing obstacles, you worship Ganapati. If you want to pass your exams, you worship Saraswati because she's the goddess of learning. If you want to increase your wealth, you worship Lakshmi because she's the goddess of wealth, and so on and so forth. So people worship many different gods. And in Christianity, we can see the equivalent with, particularly in Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity, where different saints have different specialities. So it's more or less the same thing. So because we have many desires, we seek many ways of fulfilling our desires. But slowly, the mind comes to one, and we begin to work. We're particularly attracted to one form of God. Then that one form of God becomes our Ishtadeva. And if we worship our Ishtadeva with one-pointed devotion, then slowly the mind is purified and matured, and we come to understand, why should I be asking God for this and that? When God is ready to give whatever I ask for, is not the giver greater than the gift? So rather than praying to God for this or that, I should pray to God for God alone. So then our bhakti matures from Vishaya bhakti, in other words, devotion for the sake of what we can get from God, to devotion to God for his own sake.
Mm-hmm.
When we get that devotion to God, just when we pray to God for nothing other than himself, then he appears in the form of Guru. The same God appears in the form of Guru to tell us the God you are seeking is not outside yourself. You yourself are that. Know yourself, then only will you know God. And so the Guru turns us onto this inward path, the path of self-investigation and self-surrender. So all these different forms of religion, they all have their place. And in Vedanta, for example, there are so many different interpretations of Vedanta. Shankara interpreted the Prasthanatraya according to Advaita. After Shankara, a few hundred years after Shankara, Ramanuja came along, and he disagreed with Shankara. He'd interpreted according to Vishishtadvaita. And after a couple of hundred years later came Madhvacharya. He disagreed with both Shankara and Ramanujacharya. He interpreted strictly according to Dvaita, dualism, where God and soul are always eternally separate. And then there's so many other forms of, so many other interpretations. There's Dvaita, Suddha, Dvaita, Beda, Achintya Beda. That's the Gaudiya tradition. But this ISKCON movement is an offshoot of that. Achintya Beda. Beda means there's difference and there's non-difference. Both are true, both difference and non-difference, both are true. And they say it's achintya. It's beyond our comprehension. It's inconceivable how the differences and non-differences can exist side by side. Advaita has a very simple answer. Differences are all an appearance. The reality is non-different, abheda. But there's so many different interpretations, and all of them are based on the same text, the same Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutra. Mm-hmm. These texts, if we're impartial, we have to conclude these texts are designed to be interpreted in many different ways. Mm. And so which is the correct interpretation? Every interpretation is correct for those for whom it is meant. All we can say about Advaita, it is the ultimate interpretation. It's the deepest interpretation. It doesn't mean the others are false. The others have a role to play because they answer the spiritual needs of people at a certain level of spiritual development. There are some of the less mature interpretations, they say my interpretation alone is wrong. all the others are rascal interpretations. That's the immature way of understanding it. The mature way of understanding it is all the different interpretations are appropriate at their own level. As Bhagavan said, the same teaching, that is, the teaching cannot be given en masse. Teaching has to be according to the taught. So we can see even in Bhagavan's, if we read books like Talks and Day by Day and so on, we can see Bhagavan gives different types of answers to different types of questions. He doesn't insist that everyone does Atma-vichara. He tries to push people in that direction. When they're not willing to go in that direction, he gives them the appropriate teaching for their level. Just like Krishna did in Gita. Krishna starts his teachings in chapter 2 with the very highest Advaitic teachings. Then because of Arjuna's then state of mind, he of course he's benefited by those early instructions, but he doesn't see how to apply them in practice. So Krishna gives so many different types of teachings are there in the Gita. That's why the Gita can be interpreted in so many different ways, because Krishna has given different teachings to suit different people. And the same verses are interpreted differently by different people.
Right.
So from our perspective, some verses are very clearly Advaitic. But if we listen to other people interpreting it, they interpret it in their own way. So all this is as it should be. That is, not everyone is ready for the deepest teachings. So Vedanta, like a mother who, Ramakrishna used to say this, like a mother gives different, to her grown child, she'll give a different food. To her newborn child, she gives a different food. So according to the stage of development of the child, different foods are appropriate. Like that, the Vedanta caters for people at all different stages of spiritual development.
Would we say, my last question, would we say that the experience of progression exists within the ego mind, but from the standpoint of jnana, there is no progression?
Absolutely. All the spiritual path, spiritual endeavor, it's all only for ego.
Okay.
Because jnana, that means satchit, the pure being awareness, it's immutable. Right. It never undergoes any change. It is always is as it is. We can see that from our own experience. Whatever we experience, we constantly experience constant change, but there's one thing in our experience that is unchanging. Our awareness of our own being, I am. That is constant. Whether we're in misery or whether we're having a jolly good time, we're always aware I am. So that just like the screen in the cinema, that's the analogy Bhagavan often used. The screen in the cinema, it's not. There may be a film of a wild forest fire projected on the screen. The screen isn't burnt. There may be a picture of a tsunami or a flood or something. The screen doesn't get wet. Like that our being is unaffected by any of these things. Because we couldn't experience anything without being. So being is the untouched base, the adhara, the ground, the adhisthana. That is what is real. Everything else, everything that is changing, everything that is appearing and disappearing is just an appearance. It's not real.
Thank you, Michael. I think so. Basically, there are different scriptures to suit the needs of different types of spiritual
different
aspirants.
Scriptures, but the same scriptures to cater
And the same
for different,
scriptures can be have different interpretations to suit the needs.
As Bhagavan said, the same teaching, according to the purity of Yantakarana, the same teaching reflects in different ways.
Right. So that's why really a wide spectrum.
That's why Bhagavan wasn't much concerned when people misinterpreted his teachings. because he knew that those who are ready to understand will understand. Those who are not ready to understand, they will understand in their own way.
Thank you, Michael. Sarah, do you want to go to the next question?
Michael, I want to ask about dealing with despondency in the practice, because I currently am in a situation where I am at times extremely angry at my inability to carry on with the practice. And it's a very disturbing condition for me, because now I have reached a point where I feel like my ego cannot be defeated. I get angry, and I mean, if I'm scrolling through my phone and I see Bhagwan's picture, I can't even look at the picture anymore. I feel so despondent and frustrated, and I can't read anything that's to do with the practice. I can't listen to Akshara Manamalai anymore. And I don't know how to deal with it. But then I know that I want to continue with the path.
Okay, can you answer one question for me? Which is more powerful, ego or Bhagavan's grace?
At this point, it really feels like the ego.
It feels
really
like, but I'm not asking what it feels like. Logically, which is more powerful?
Well, logically, Bhagwan's grace, which is why I'm still here,
Right.
which is why I'm
So
not willing to give up on this.
Trust his grace. It's by his grace that you're unable to give this up. So depend more and more on his grace. If none of us can achieve this by our own strength. The very nature of ego is to go outwards, to constantly grasp form. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, grasping form it comes into existence, grasping form it stands, grasping and feeding on forms it flourishes abundantly, leaving form it grasps form. So grasping form, that means grasping vishayas, things other than itself, that's the very nature of ego. So this love to turn within and surrender ourselves, that can come only from grace. And grace is not something other than ourselves. Grace is the reality of ourselves. It's what we actually are. So we need to depend more and more on that grace. And sometimes it may seem that we're not making any progress, but even our frustration is itself a part of the process of grace. So trust in him.
Is there anything
Sadhu Om wrote a very simple verse. He wrote it in Tamil. I've forgotten the Tamil verse now, but in English, the meaning is, because he wrote it in Tamil, he also translated it as a verse in English. He knows the best of all. Leave it to him, be calm. Believe him the most of all, then rest the mental storm.
Thank you, Michael. This helps. I know that some of these answers were inside me, but I needed to hear someone else say it out loud sometimes.
Bhagavan is always saying it if you listen to him. But
And I
Bhagavan
will
is saying it in silence, so we need to listen to him in silence by subsiding within. The more we rise as ego, the less we are listening to what Bhagavan is always telling us. We don't have to do anything. We just have to subside.
Now, I know that this is not the non-dualist way of doing things, but I will ask all of you to pray for me. I don't know. I was raised Muslim, so for me, the power of someone else.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But that is, what do we pray for ultimately? We pray for grace. But that grace is ever present. And grace is ever ready to do for us everything that we want it to do. But we are the ones who are obstructing grace. Because one thing grace will never do, grace and Bhagavan and God or whatever they're all synonyms. That is, grace is God himself, Bhagavan himself. That grace will never force itself upon us. It will never kill us until we are willing to be killed by it. So the only obstacle to grace is our rising as ego. But the only way to be saved from the rising of ego is by grace. So we as ego need to learn to yield ourselves more and more to that grace, to trust that grace more and more.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone who is sincerely following this path will feel their own lack of love, their own that is their own worthlessness for following this path. None of us are qualified for following this path. Whatever little love we have to follow this path is entirely by grace. So the more we can learn to yield ourselves to that grace, the more we will find that love to be as we actually are will grow, and the more we will thereby subside.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sarah. Deepti, you're muted.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, great. Namaskar, Michael.
Namaskar.
Yes, it's been a while since I've chatted with you. Nothing has changed. I'm still very much an ego. So
we're all in the same boat. I'm also the same.
Michael, you cannot say that. I wish you would say you were different a little bit.
No, we're all in the same boat.
We need the hope. We need the hope that we can, if everybody says we're in the same boat, even like
we are all in the same boat, but maybe if there's any difference at all, maybe Bhagavan has given me a little bit more confidence in his grace. But other than that, I'm no different to anyone.
Right. No, right. Yeah, that's what it is. It's just I can resonate with Sarah a little bit, and that
I can resonate with her a lot, more than just a little bit.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. I guess I don't know, Michael, because all I know is myself as, I guess, as this person, body, mind, blah blah blah. But I understand, like
you know I am Dipti.
Yes.
Can you know I am Dipti without knowing I am?
But they're so, and like I don't know how to separate the screen from the movie. Like when I'm looking
I know they're conflated. They're completely bound together. But slowly, we have to shift our attention, shift our interest away from this person we seem to be and all its troubles, back to our being, back to I am, because that is what we actually are.
But Michael, to do like, even when I try or when I don't, whatever it is, there's no, I guess it's not an effort or lack, whatever it is, but it doesn't have any qualities. It doesn't have any, because all the knowing I know, whatever I know now is through the mind, and the mind only can grasp objective things, right?
No, you're not telling the truth. There's one thing you know that is independent of the mind, that you know whether the mind is present or not. That is I am. We should never forget that. We should never forget. That's what this is all about, is shifting away from this mind and all this mind knowledge, back to the fundamental knowledge, the knowledge of our own being, I am.
Right. That I am has nothing. I mean, from a perspective of the mind, it is.
Yes. It is nirvishaya, nirvisesha. It's devoid of everything, but it's the fullness of being, the fullness of Satchidananda. It is Purna.
And are the mind and that, are they eternally opposed? Like the mind can never grasp it, and then
We can't say eternally opposed, because it is the very basis of the mind. The mind can never leave that. It seems to be leaving that by going outwards, but actually it's always that's the ground it stands on.
wow, right. That's the bait, right? So whether whatever yes, like even when the mind is agitated or whatever it is, it goes through.
Yeah. That is the one thing. Mind obscures the awareness I am. It never conceals the awareness I am. It obscures it in the sense it makes our being seem to be something other than what we actually are. I am this body. I am this person. I have so many problems.
Right. Yes.
Material problems and spiritual problems, full of problems. At least the worldly people only have material problems. We have we have double doses. We've got our material problems and our spiritual problems.
I tell you, it's yes. Yep, double trouble.
So, Deepthi, regular practice. Practice and practice. Remember? Palaha, remember that?
Yes.
We talked about it. So, well, I want to correct Michael. He actually said he has a little bit more confidence in Bhagavan than you do. Actually, he has a lot more confidence than you and I do.
Even this confidence, I can't say I've got it.
Right.
That is, it's entirely his grace. But somehow I just feel that if I didn't have that confidence, I don't know where I would be. That is, I live by that confidence.
No, that's beautiful, Michael.
There's a beautiful song of well, hundreds of beautiful songs of Sadhu Om, but one comes to the mind. Enalumunarul enekai vidadendre irukindre aruvai arunachala. That is, I exist. I live by with that trust, but your grace will never abandon me.
Wow.
Thank you, Michael.
How else can we live in this world?
Exactly. I think at the end of the day, the trust is important, right? I mean, the trust in Bhagavan, that's what has kept me going. And then the other day, last week, and remember, Muran, we were talking, even after coming to Bhagavan, it took me a few years for me to really start practicing Atma-vichara and so forth. So during that period of, I don't know, a couple of years or something like that, it's something in me that's made me trust him. That this is it. I'm done searching, because I really read. I don't mean to brag. I really read a lot of our scriptures. But then once I came to Bhagavan, there's something in me tell, this is it. I'm done searching. So I don't want to read any more books. I just want to focus only on Bhagavan's teachings. So that's how it starts. And then we really don't mean to sound cultish, but once we come to Bhagavan, and I think we really need to start focusing on Bhagavan's teachings. We are very fortunate to have come this far. And I think we want to just focus. And so that way, because every time is precious, every minute is precious, right? So we want to, the more and more we can trust in him and focus on his teachings, that'll help us practice more. And that doubt, that self-doubt and everything will just slowly decrease. That's just my experience.
This is why in all the Vedanta Sastras, one quality that is always emphasized is Shraddha. Shraddha is usually translated as faith. But I think it's better to view it as confidence, because faith is very much associated with those religions that prescribe a blind belief in God. Shraddha is not a blind belief. Shraddha is a confidence, and that confidence is born of inner clarity. That is, the more clearly we understand Bhagavan's teachings, the more trust we have, the more confidence we have. This is the only way. This is the truth.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not doubting. I'm very clear this is the only way, but I think the way is it's when I try to attend to myself, I don't know. I don't have an experience of it, or maybe I do have an experience, but I don't know what it is.
The difficulty we attending to ourselves is not at all easy. Sorry, not at all difficult. Bhagavan has said, "Aye ati solapam, anma vide aye ati solapam." Extremely easy is Atma-vichara. Actually, those are Murugan's words, but Bhagavan sang through Murugana and used Murugana as a pretext for writing the verses emphasizing that. So it's extremely easy. Why it seems to us to be difficult is because of our lack of love. Well, it's all a matter of love. And if we're honest with ourselves, we all are very sadly lacking in that love. But the only way to cultivate that love is to try our best to follow this path. However much we seem to be failing, doesn't matter. So long as failure is not something to be concerned about. Because if we're failing, it means we're trying. If we weren't trying, we wouldn't be failing. So even the failure we should welcome, because it means at least we're trying. And that's all that matters. So long as we try, Bhagavan will do everything else.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you, Michael. Ram Tanati, go ahead. Next question.
Michael, you said the last point is keep on trying. Is that what you said? I missed that.
I missed it also. I can't remember.
The very last thing you said to Deepthi, Deepthi, what did he say?
Oh,
practice, and more practice.
Okay.
Yes, we just have to keep on trying. So long as we're trying, we are giving a blank check to Bhagavan.
Okay.
We are yielding ourselves to his grace.
Okay.
As Krishna says beautifully in the Gita, you have the right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. That applies here also. We have to try. Whether we succeed or not doesn't matter. The fruit is in Bhagavan's hands. He knows when is the time to give us what we are all struggling for. He knows when we are ready for it. He won't give it until we are ready for it. But we cannot know how close we are to being ready for it until he gives it. And then we'll be swallowed, so we won't know anything anyway.
Right. The couple questions I have, the number one is vasanas that we talk about. Is it a repetition of a thought that becomes a vasana? What is a vasana?
A vasana is an inclination.
Is that a repetition of a thought?
It's more of an inclination, means it's a volitional tendency, we can say. That is, vasanas are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, and so on. Or in other words, the likes, dislikes, desires, fears, and so on, in their seed form are called vasanas. So it has that volitional element to it.
But it came from somewhere, right?
It's the nature of ego. As Bhagavan says, ego, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. This is the nature of ego, is to constantly grasp vishayas, forms, things other than itself. So the inclination to do so is it's the very nature of ego to have those inclinations. It's not the ego is not the vasanas, but it's the nature of ego to have vasanas, to have the inclination, because we depend for our very survival as ego on constantly grasping other things. So we have very strong inclination. That's why Bhagavan said these inclinations are rising in countless numbers like ocean waves. People say, when I sit for meditation, then the vasanas start coming. No, the vasanas are coming from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we go to sleep at night. Throughout every dream, it's all a play of our vasanas. This whole world is nothing but a play of our vasanas.
Right? He said from time immemorial, this vasanas are coming.
Well, Kumar, that's where I guess I'm coming from. In the time, maybe it's theoretical, just shut me off this if it doesn't matter. But I feel, someone has a vasana to travel, someone has a vasana to pray, someone has a vasana for a third thing. But at the root of it, it all started somewhere at the beginning. I'm sure there was a state
from us as ego. As soon as we rise as ego, we have that inclination. The inclinations, it's the very nature of ego to have these inclinations.
I guess my question is, different people have different vasanas.
Yes, because the vasanas are strengthened the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. And vasanas give birth to vasanas. For example, supposing you many of us are born non-Tamilians. But when we come to have an interest in Bhagavan's teachings, then we come to have an interest in Tamil. So the love for Bhagavan's teaching gives us a love for Tamil. So like that, through the vasanas are constantly multiplying, because every vasana is associated with something, with other, that every interest we have leads to other interests and leads to other interests and leads to other interests.
Oh, along those lines, I've seen some who come that way, but then got swayed a lot by the vasana for Tamil.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that often happens.
That can happen too, and we need to be vigilant, to make sure those things don't happen. And it's an addictive language.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example, but this is what is happening. This is why we find people with diverse interests. How we all start off from the same point, but how we have, because we follow that. These vasanas are like branches, and we have the freedom to follow this branch or this branch, and if we follow this branch, then this branch or this branch, and it's constantly the very nature of vasanas is self-replicating and generating new, fresh vasanas.
Okay.
But irrespective of it, Ram, I mean, it doesn't matter how it rises. And I think,
yes.
If you just keep practicing, all of those are going to die off. Michael, could you just translate this line? Thondrudattu varugintra vishaya vasanaigal alavatranavai thondrinum avayavum swarupa dhyanam kilamba alindu vidum.
Even though Vishaya vasanas, which rise in countless numbers from time immemorial, which come, even the Vishaya vasanas, which come from time immemorial, rise in countless numbers like ocean waves, they will all be destroyed as Swarupa Dhyana, self-attentiveness, increases and increases.
So we don't need to, Kumar and Michael, so you're saying that don't worry about why people have different vasanas. When the vasana comes up, just figure out who is getting the vasana and go back to the source.
Exactly.
Okay.
Don't worry about others. Don't worry about, the vasanas are also others, so don't worry about the vasanas. To whom are all these vasanas?
Okay, all right.
We should be constantly focusing on our own being. That's what that's what the whole thing is about.
The one thing Sarah brought up that is of interest also for me is sometimes the good and melancholic emotions. She was more on the melancholic emotion, the good emotions too, which is we are overjoyed because of sensual pleasures. Both have a tendency to sway us away. So even in the middle of that maelstrom, we should still figure out who is getting swayed away.
Yes, because they're all Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya means objects or phenomena. Everything is, that is the whole, all our experience is phenomena. So the whatever mood we're in, whatever feelings we have, whatever thoughts we have, whatever sights we see, whatever sounds we hear, it's all Vishayas. But to whom do all these Vishayas appear? That is what we need to focus on.
Exactly.
And then the grace, you said, we talked several times, grace is there all the time. Is there any significance to even thinking about it? Because it's there anyways, all the time, for everyone, equally.
If grace is what is shining in our heart as eye, so we should be attending to it, grace, as our own being. But to understand that the nature of our being is infinite love, of course it's useful to understand that, particularly for those of us who, when we're struggling on this path because of lack of love, to remember that our real nature is infinite love. So it's only because of this false identification that we seem to be lacking love. Actually, infinite love is our very being. So understanding these things helps us a lot. It encourages us. It increases our confidence.
Okay. The last one is, what is the core teaching of Yoga Vasishtha? Is it self-attention?
It's the same, yes. The word vichara occurs multiple times in Yoga Vasishtha. It's all, in so many ways, it's directing us back to the same core. That's why Bhagavan translated many verses from Yoga Vasishtha, and many more he pointed out, because it's a very nice text on the practical. It's not considered one of the classical texts of Vedanta, but actually it's got a lot of practical application of Vedanta, but told in the form of like a Puranic story.
Yeah. Series of stories.
Yeah.
So thank you, Michael.
Thank you both.
Thank you. So the last three questions. One from Robert. Go ahead, Robert Delgesh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm addressing myself to Dee, and I think Melissa's listening, the lady with the beautiful soft voice. When I saw your face, Dee, you seemed earnest but frustrated. And I think that's true of a lot of us that begin this path. And I want to go back to that feeling of I, or that thought, the I thought, or the feeling of I. Remember, when people walk past Bhagavan occasionally and they caught his eyes looking at them, it transformed them. In other words, what was in them was in him, and it was awakened by him. They felt that recognition. They felt this, the Brahman. They felt self. And once you get that feeling, once you know that you are that, then the practice just becomes a way of steadying that apprehension, that recognition that you are already that. Practice for me is just steadying that. Hope that helps.
Comments, Michael?
Yes. I is not just a thought or a feeling. I becomes a thought when it conflated with adjuncts. But I is our very being. That is what we need to hold on to. Hold on to our being.
Amen.
And that is ever stable. What is unstable is the mind. The mind is, by its very nature, it is fickle. By its very nature, it's trying to go out and grasp things other than itself. So we need, that's why patient and persistent practice is necessary. And we should not be disheartened by our failure. Because failure, it's inevitable on this path. We'll be constantly failing because it's the nature of the mind. The mind is just not willing to subside and be quiet. But we have to continue trying more and more just to remember our being, remember our amness. All these problems occur to the outward-facing mind. But why should we be outward-facing? Let us try more and more to find refuge in our own being. That is the ultimate refuge. There's no safe place anywhere other than in the heart. That means in our own being. And our being is Bhagavan.
Thank you, Michael. Bruce, next question.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the importance and inner importance of southward facing worship?
That's what this is all about, simply about being selfward facing. The nature of ego is to be outward facing, bahirmukham. Bhagavan asks us to be antamukham or ahamukham, facing inwards, facing towards the I. So it's simply, it's shifting our attention away from all these myriad phenomena back towards to whom do all these appear?
Yeah, I said southward, not selfward, but it's the same answer, I believe.
Sorry, I didn't.
So you're saying southward from Dakshinamurti? Is that what you're getting from?
Yeah, that's the point.
Southward.
But
Okay.
it's the same answer.
Yes. Okay. There may be different explanations of the fact that Dakshinamurti is facing southwards, but south is considered as Yama Disai, the direction of Yama. So because Dakshinamurti is Kala Kalam, he's the killer of Yama, of death, of time. Kala Kalam literally means time to time. So time is death. That is, the time is coming for each and every one of us. We don't know when. It may be the next minute, it may be a few years ahead. But so time and death are considered synonymous. And Lord Shiva is called Kala Kalan. He is death to death, time to time. He brings an end to death. So long as there's time, there's certainly be death. So time brings death along with it. So the ending of time is is alone the ending of death. So that Dakshinamurti is facing southward because he conquers. He's that is the one thing from which death will fear is Shiva. Shiva means our own being. Yama can catch this body, But one thing Yama can never catch is our being. So if you want, there's a story of, I think, Markandeya, a young boy who went and embraced the Shiva Linga. And when Yama came, this boy was destined to die. So he went to a temple and he embraced the Shiva Linga. So Yama came with his lasso and put his lasso over the boy, and he also put his lasso over the Shiva Linga. So Shiva came out of the linga and kicked Yama. These are all Puranics, these are all allegorical ways of saying that if we hold on to our being, this death will not be able to touch us.
That's like the story of Bhagavan.
Yeah.
It's almost identical because it's the same age.
Yes, yes.
And that Bhagavan
Bhagavan
embraced the linga
he did.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
What he's embracing the linga on September the 1st, that is the outward representation of what had actually happened in Madurai 6 weeks earlier. Because the true Shiva Linga is our own being, that which is shining as eye in the heart of each and every one of us. That is the true Shiva Linga.
It reminds me of the story. I forget the exact who the devotee was, but the story of the devotee that had to go to the guru that was in the forest, and he was an old man, and he was the old man was putting his feet.
Namdev and Vitoba.
Yeah, you could tell that story. It's such a good story because that's what I mean about direction.
Yes, I think Vittal is a form of Vishnu that's worshipped in Pandharpur. I think Vittal is actually Krishna. He's worshipped in Pandharpur, and Vittal sent Namdev, his devotee Namdev, to his guru. He said, you have to go to the guru. He will teach you. And at first Namdev was unwilling. He said, I worship only you. I'm not interested in any guru. And then Vittal said, no, I have brought this guru just for you. He's outside the town. He lives in a small old temple. So go and see him. So Namdev is very obedient. He goes to see this guru, who's called Vitoba. I may get the names wrong, but I think this is, if I remember it correctly. And when he goes to see Vitoba, he is horrified. He sees this old man lying on the floor of the temple with his feet on the Shiva Linga. And he says to him, what is this? What sacrilege is this? You've got your feet on the Shiva Linga. And Vitoba says, I'm an old man, I'm blind, I can't see where my feet are. Please place my feet somewhere where there is no Shiva Linga. And wherever Namdev moved his Vitoba's feet, a Shiva Linga sprouted up there. So finally, he couldn't find any place where he could put Vitoba's feet where a Shiva Linga didn't appear. So finally, he put Vitoba's feet on his head, and he himself became Shiva Linga. That means he, by that ultimate surrender to Guru, he attained the Atma-vichara. That's why Vitoba, of course, Vitoba and, Vittal, the god in the temple, who sent to the Guru Vitoba, they're of course one and the same. But it's necessary it was necessary for Namdev to get those teachings, to be sent by Vittal to Vitoba to receive that teaching. That's a story Bhagavan often told. It's a very beautiful story.
Yeah. Thank you. Namo Ramanaya.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Last question from Carlos.
Well, I wrote the question in the chat. box. I'm going to read it, not to forget the details. Can we compare the practice of Atma-vichara with a funambulist walking on a tight rope who puts their full attention on the rope, try not to fall to either side? Or
yes,
in
the Upanishads, it's described as the razor's edge, because we are trying to remain fixed in our being. When we are holding on to our being, pramada can occur in two ways. Pramada means negligence or inattentiveness. That pramada can take either of two forms. Either we can be carried away by vasanas and get caught up in thoughts, or we fall asleep. Both the forms of pramada. If we're holding on to self-attentiveness firmly, we will not be carried away by thoughts. We will not succumb to sleep. So we are, so to speak, walking on the razor's edge, not slipping this way or this way. Or, as you say, the tightrope.
Yeah, another way is like, I mean, sometimes when I practice, it's like keeping the cell phone upright, like, and it keeps falling, like either side, and make it stand firmly. It's like the vasanas will make it.
That is the nature. That's the nature of it. That's why I'm always doubtful when someone says, I remain in meditation for 20 minutes, I didn't have thoughts. God alone knows what state they're in, but that is not self-attentiveness. Because anyone who's seriously practiced self-attentiveness, to really hold on to that steadily, even for a few moments,
it's really hard.
Because the very nature of the mind is to go outwards.
Mm-hmm.
That's why many people get discouraged. Oh, I'm no good at that. That's why Bhagavan is said to we just have to continue practicing. But practice is absolutely essential.
Yeah. And also regarding the verse that you explained today, because I heard some people also who say that by going within and clinging to ourselves, like they see how they're not the doer or something, no? Like things are.
So long as there's an I that says I am not the doer, there is still doership there. Because that I is still identified as I am this or that.
Yeah.
When the doership is gone, there's not even the rising of I to say, I am without doership.
So then
as Bhagavan puts it beautifully in the second verse of Arunachala Ashtakam. And I doesn't rise to say, I have seen. How then can an I rise to say, I have not seen? Who can express this state in words when even you in ancient times expressed it without, who can elucidate this speaking when in ancient times even you elucidated it without speaking? That is, only silence can express that state. If we say, I have seen or I have not seen, both are false. As Bhagavan says in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, to say I have known myself or I have not known myself, both are ground for ridicule.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
So that was a good session. Thank you, and we'll meet with Michael again next month for discussion of verse 31 of Anubandham.
Yeah, so for a few more verses, it is the same theme. Just 31 is I think that's the sleeper in the cart. Then about the waking, dream, sleep, and churiya. then about Sanchita, Nagamya, not adhering to a jnani, but prarabdha does remain. That's an answer to a reply of others.
Right.
So for the next 3 verses, Bhagavan continues to talk about the state of the jnani.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Michael.